All
All
right.
right. So, welcome back to another episode of the JB'scapades. Happy April
Yes.
to
Oh, we made
everyone.
it.
We made it. Q1 done. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Pat
Down
yourself on
one.
the back. You made it through Q1. We made it
Both.
through
Both.
Q1.
Right. We just.
Oh my gosh. Y'all, we
Yeah.
here. It's spring,
Yeah.
it's April. But the hits keep coming and we're still here. And we wanted to bring you and something that's been sitting on our spirits as we move into our third decade on this planet. Um,
We hit the mark. Now we just living in the decade. Now we just
Now
like,
we just
all right.
here, right? Yes, we turned 30 at the start of the pandemic.
Mhm.
Womp womp. But but what we wanted to bring to you today was something that we've been thinking about as we move on in age, but not just age, but in terms of maturity, wisdom, experience, so on and so forth. And so today's topic is achievement guilt. Um,
Yeah. Just let that sit with you for like, just,
yeah,
yeah. You
this is
know,
this is a deep one.
it is. So I originally was watching Survivor's Remorse, the show on Stars that got canceled, but it's about a basketball player who's on the Atlanta Hawks. It's a fictional show. I think it's fictional, but I mean, it's something that I was able to relate to. And not unfortunately, but what I find is that the people I'm able to relate to the people who are most visible, who I'm able to relate to the most, are celebrities who are from the hood. It's basketball players who were hooping, they had hoop dreams, and they know what oodles and noodles taste like, and they finally achieve some success. And it's like, oh, okay, I understand what you're going through. I'm not experiencing the success that you're
Right.
experiencing, but
Not
it's a
yet.
stark contrast, and you don't meet many people outside of really those industries who see that big of a contrast between how they grew up and how they're living as adults. So that's where the idea came from with me, and me knowing my bestie the way I know my bestie. I was like, Bridge, I know you too have been, you know what it's like to achieve and have a guilt around what achievement looks like. So a lot of our friends are experiencing this, and we know that a lot of our followers may be experiencing this as well. So we felt like it would be a topic that would be important to address, especially in this season, right? There are people thriving in this pandemic, and there's a guilt associated with feeling like you can say, no, 2020 was actually not horrible for me.
Yeah,
There's
that's
an
a tough
achievement
one.
guilt. Yeah, there's an achievement guilt, even with something as simple as what we're living in right now.
Right. Be it like feeling safe financially, mentally, emotionally, feeling supported, those kinds of things.
Right.
And I don't know how often it gets talked about it, but I very much know that in our circles, it's not as often as it probably should be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Given the fact that as you move up, you're going to have different networks, different opportunities, and you're going to need support. You're going to need friendship. You're going to need mentorship. You're going to need all of these resources that maybe you didn't grow up having. So, something to think about. And so, I guess we can launch in
Mm-hmm.
and just thinking about the guilt associated with the opportunities that may not have been available to us growing up. There's something to what you have to leave behind in order to move
Ooh,
on, right? In
ooh,
order to grow, right? Like some behaviors and patterns and things like that. Um, so what's something that you had to learn or unlearn, Joan?
yeah. I had to learn about finances. I had to learn what it meant to enjoy when I was making money that, I had earned, but also to save it. And I had to learn the delicate balance of doing that while also building credit and planning for the future, because saving for today is different than saving for 10 years from now, right? Saving for today is I could get in an accident and I need to have an emergency savings plan for that. But I could also want to retire, in 10 years. That's a whole nother type of plan. But I had to learn that outside of my family. I think we first get exposed to money by our parents. The first person you ask for anything that money is tied to is usually your parent or guardian. And my parents just had a very interesting relationship with money now that I look back. So my mom was who I would consider the more responsible one with money, because she didn't believe in credit cards. In her mind, if she did not have it, she didn't need it. If she didn't have, if something like a bathroom renovation project, which I specifically remember, I told her I was in this basketball phase and I was like, she asked me what color I wanted the bathroom to be. And I said, well, what if it was like Spalding orange? And to the last day of me going into that house, that bathroom was Spalding orange. And it was a beautiful orange to me. But just to think that at 13 years old, I tell my mom I want the bathroom to be orange and that's the color it's going to be. But she didn't put that on credit. She didn't finance that project. She said, we're not getting a renovation. I'm not doing anything to this house if I don't have the money in my hand. But what that also meant is she couldn't save. She saved up for things that she could see here in this lifetime, but she didn't save for her future. And my dad was on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, where he didn't neither one of them saved. Let's be clear. Neither one of them believed in saving.
Saving and investing is a risk, right? When you grow up, not having it, like it's a risk. Either way, it's a risk.
Yeah. So. I mean, and to be fair, they weren't at jobs where they could afford to really save. They were making enough to take care of me and themselves. They weren't making enough to save. But my dad, on the other hand, was, he believed in credit a great deal. He believed a great deal in credit. And he thought that he operated as though you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, So there's I'm going to spend everything I've got today because I can't take it with me when I go. And those are dangerous mindsets when you're trying to build the type of wealth that I'm trying to build. I'm like, what do you mean? We don't know what tomorrow brings. Like, I think I have a pretty good idea of what tomorrow, I don't know what 10 years from now brings, but tomorrow at least.
And can we talk about how the first real time you kind of like have to process what the income is like that FAFSA process during college application? Like, whoo! Yeah. It was like, okay, Ma, can I have your papers? Like, okay, Dad, can I have your papers? Like, they were holding on tight.
I mean, but then even the community we grew up in, right? Where it was common for single mothers to not include the father's income because we wanted to get to college on a full ride. And the fact that most schools, I know, okay, I'm sorry, I don't know if we want to get
Let's talk about it, because that's what I did.
Same. I literally I had counselors really write notes saying, we don't know who that man is.
That's a strategy. My dad did not exist.
Does not exist, right? Does not exist.
I don't know this man.
I mean, unfortunately, you and I went to schools that still, like, gave us really good financial aid packages. Like Dartmouth at the time had a requirement of 75,000 or below meant that you would get a full ride, which you know, to most people in my community, that meant we were good because we were living in single parent households. But even if you're in the hood and your parents have blue collar jobs or just, you know, decent jobs, 75 is still, that's a stretch.
That's a stretch for most Americans today. I feel like it's like 69 grand is the average across the state. So like, yeah, you know.
So we went to these elite institutions. But so there were things like that let me know my parents did not really ask questions when it came to finances, when it came to their retirement plans. There were things I was asking my mom and my dad close to their retirement that they had no idea about. They were just like, well, hey, I'm doing what the people in our HR office tell us to do. We are a very different generation. We ask about the 401k. We ask about the life insurance. You know, we ask about what life is going to look like for us beyond these here jobs. And that generation didn't do that. So it's less of me unlearning because there was nothing to really unlearn. There was me taking the initiative to learn the things that my parents they didn't know and ask questions they didn't ask about finances specifically. But what about you when it comes to finances or, you know, in general, things you had to learn or unlearn?
Yeah. So everything that Joan just said was exactly my experience, with the exception that like I had watched my parents work like 2 and 3 jobs and stuff like that. And so I knew that they valued it if they didn't necessarily know what to do with it. But, you know, it was a little different in that sense. But in terms of like something big that I'm working on presently in terms of achievement, Gil, it's like how much I've been able to invest in myself and my mental health. And that's not something that is very typical of anyone associated with my upbringing. So we are, you know, the parentals are currently exploring mental health options. You know, they're currently expanding their mind frames. They're opening up more. One of them is in therapy, and I'm just like super proud of everyone is unlearning the attitudes that we kind of grew up with. Because the same way that like I grew up not really thinking about mental health or considering mental health a really big piece of, you know, identity. My parents are now kind of in a phase where they're growing up and learning to focus on their mental health. You know, it all comes from here and here. So if this ain't right, then what are you going to do? And then in terms of like our actual background, we're Caribbean, we're West African, and like those are not largely cultures that even believe in mental health. And so, or stereotypically. So, you know, no one had been to therapy, no one had been seeking mental health services. I went to college and I explored some, you know, some free counseling. I graduated, I went back to therapy. Dad was like, well, what's the point of that? You could just talk to me. And I remember being like, not about you, I can't talk to you about you.
That's come on. You
that's the point. So, you know, here we are. The parentals are, you know, it's taking them a while, but they've actually come around to thinking about, you know, mental health and wellness as like this really big piece of moving up and moving on. And so that's something massive, you know, still under development. Same here. I'm still a project. We're all still projects that has shifted since I was a child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, no, that is so powerful. And a lot of the unlearning I'm realizing when it comes to achievement guilt has to be for the parents and the generations before us. Like we have to be in positions where we can help them unlearn because we already know that what they were doing isn't going to work, or it's not going to work for us at least.
No. Yeah, and they're learning that too, you know. Pops is like, listen, okay, I got all these children who are so self-aware and like I need to be in their lives and super active and like how do I do that? And so it means opening up.
Girl, that's a word. So okay, thinking about what it means for us to have achieved, and achieved beyond our parents' wildest dreams. Really, like even though this is new to them, we have achieved beyond what they were able to dream, and sometimes even what they were able to dream for us. So with that said, have you ever felt any pressure to succeed or achieve, or a pressure to provide? So when we think about achievement guilt, there can be this idea that once you make it, you have to reach back and help others. And we've been hearing that rhetoric forever, even at the Frederick Douglass Academy in Harlem, New York. We saw alumni coming back and starting scholarship funds, right? I'll never forget Yada Beamer. I don't know what she's doing with her life right now, but I know she came down to Spelman. Hey, Yada. She came down here to Atlanta to go to Spelman, and I'll never forget, she came up and she started a scholarship fund, and she was still in college at the time. I was like, so I knew that we felt that this generation that I was in, the people who were a few years older than me, we felt a responsibility to give back. But with that said, have you felt a pressure? Because there's a responsibility and there's a pressure. So yeah, what would you say in that?
Right. That's what we do to ourselves and what others in society does to us. And I would like to remind the audience that we are Black women. We are first gen, for me, second gen college grads. We are, spearheading a lot of things for our respective families. And so that's kind of where some of this questioning comes from. And for me, I think it all hit home when I left home, when I went to undergrad. I was 3,000 miles away from home for the first time. I had left.
Girl, yeah, you were.
I left everybody behind. I said, toodles. I had no family in LA and presumably no responsibilities, right? So, I told Dad, I said, I'm about to go study French. And my pops, my very West African pops, was like, French? Girl.
Teach you French. Now let me say.
He was like, I can teach you French if you want to know French. First of all, we don't even come from a French-speaking country.
But I'm sure Dad would have been like,
oh yeah. He's like, girl, I understand it. We could just do this at home, Duolingo. But
we could do this at home. I love it because I could hear your dad saying that. That's
right. It's wild. We don't speak French at home, y'all. So it was like something to the effect of French is not going to get you far, and in fact, if you don't go far, then guess who's not going to go far? Your siblings, and we may have mentioned that I have a bunch of siblings, of younger siblings. And so we went to school back to back. And so that was always a message, even as far back as like elementary school, when there were like 4 of us in the same school, it was like, Bridge, be the example for your siblings. And so the message really hit home when I was 3,000 miles away, because I still felt that pressure, from 3,000 miles away. The pressure to be myself, learn myself, explore what I want to do and how I want to do things, and be accountable to myself. And also set a good example for those who were coming up behind me. And that is still the case. In a lot of ways. My dad is still telling me, you bought the house? Okay, cool. Now show your siblings how to do it. You moved up? Okay, cool. Now go look at that one's resume, and he doesn't mean anything by it. And it's cultural, but it's also like spiritual. It's been so ingrained in us that at this point, I don't see it necessarily as a burden. Again, we're talking about unlearning. So in that sense, sometimes it feels a little heavy, but I've taken it on as my mantle. And I think a lot of us have. And that's part of what some of that guilt is. Sometimes it's about like, can I really do that and take care of me? You know, how am I going to balance those two things?
That's real.
Yeah. What about you, Joan? How have you felt? How, not have you, but how have you felt
Yeah.
pressure to succeed or to provide, to achieve?
So I'm an only child, unlike Bridge. And what that meant was I didn't feel a need to provide for siblings, but I felt the need to succeed because I needed to survive on my own. I wanted to be able to help my parents out one day. That was a goal of mine. But I knew that because of the parents I had to first succeed for myself, So my mom lost her mom when she was 16 years old. So my mother was just, she was in grind mode really her whole life. From 16 on, she was in grind mode and she had to survive on her own. She spent some time out in Cali, then came back to Harlem, lived in Brooklyn for a little bit, then finally landed her a good job with the city. Anybody who's from New York knows if you get you a good city or government job with New York, you don't leave.
Life. Yeah.
So she worked her way up and she did that by herself. I saw that and was inspired by that because she wasn't an only child, but she was the one responsible for her survival. My dad was the oldest son, and there was a responsibility for him there where it was like, nobody's going to take care of you. You have to go out and you have to provide for yourself. So he went to the Air Force. He always had a job, was always doing things with his life, moving for himself to take care of himself. So I grew up with very independent parents who really impressed that upon me. When I left for college, and this is no shade to my mom or to either of my parents really, but when I came home, I knew that it was to visit, and it wasn't anything that was out of malice but it was just the reality of it. My mother gave me 18 years of taking care of me and putting food on the table. And when you think about it, 18 years is it's a long time. And I can't even imagine people who have multiple children, right? But my mother was a single mom, didn't like asking people for anything. So she took care of me with everything she had. And I knew that after those 18 years, I wouldn't expect her to do anything more than what she did because she went above and beyond. I got into Dartmouth. You know what I mean? Like I got into
she got into Dartmouth.
She got my mom.
I'm sorry.
No, that's what it was. We got into Dartmouth, is what it was. And once I left, and because it was the school it was, right? Because my mom was the mom she was telling the whole hood about me. She was so proud. That was another thing. There was pressure I put on myself because I knew that my mom was bragging about me to the whole hood.
There's that kind of guilt too. Like if I don't come back with the I
gotta come back looking like, listen, I gotta be talking like Diddy, looking like I just fell out of money, look like, feel like, smell like money. That's how I felt like I had to come back from this Ivy League school. And so I didn't. And so I didn't come back. I went to Jacksonville, Florida, but where nobody knew my name. And was like,
y'all, we not famous yet. So like
what I won't do is shame my mama.
To our parents, we are famous, but to everybody else,
not
so much. But to our parents, we are famous. We are known.
We are known. So I did a little work on myself in Jacksonville and came home with a book, and then that changed the game. Then it was
because the book was all over Harlem too.
My mama was selling it out of her mink coat, like in that scene from Coming to America. It was real. It was just, so for me, it was this pressure to live up to this standard, live up to this dream she had for me, which wasn't a specific dream, right? It was I want you to be able to provide for yourself. I want you to be able to, it was nothing specific. It was, I want you to be happy and I want you to be able to take care of yourself. But what that meant was I knew I couldn't lean on anybody. Mm-hmm. And the guilt that came with that for me was, if I can't help, if I can't help the way I want, if my Ivy League degree wasn't able to get my mama out the hood, then I'm not doing everything that I should be doing, or I could be doing. So for me, it was, well, I'm not going to be in y'all face. I'm not going to be, I'm just not going to be around here. So I've not moved back home. I have not really, and I feel like I'm doing well now. And I know my mom was always proud of me, but how achievement guilt showed up in my life was, I felt like I couldn't come back home without something to show my mom, but for something to show Harlem. Like, mm-hmm. there was that pressure that I put on myself, even because I felt like I had to be big. I had to be grand. I had to, achieve beyond what I thought I had achieved at that time. So that's how the guilt showed up for me. But, over time, I had conversations with my mom, and I had conversations with people about my mom where they affirmed for me how proud she was of me, without me having, achieved the things I thought I needed to achieve. So, yeah, that was a whole like 4 or 5 years of my life of sitting in that guilt of not living up to these imaginary standards that I created for myself.
Right. And not just that, but there is societal pressure for children who are the first to do things. It's not all made up.
Yeah. And really the only one to do things, like at least in your case, I know you're the oldest and you were setting the example, but you at least, if you messed up, there was at least a sibling after you, and then a sibling after you, and then a sibling.
Well, it has a cumulative effect. So that's the thing when you mess up as an older sibling,
But see, for me, it's, if I messed up as the only child, I'm the only hope. I'm the only hope. So yeah, that's what I would say. But when we think about overcoming the guilt, I spoke a little bit about what that process looked like for me, which was realizing that my mom really was proud of me, and that's really all I care about in this life. Mm-hmm. The woman who birthed me being proud of me. I don't got, when I lost my mom, I stopped caring. I was like, I ain't got nothing to prove to none of y'all. Nothing.
Always the case. Yeah.
So let's see. So what are some things you have done to overcome? I ain't even gonna say try to overcome, because my girl, I'm gonna tell y'all something about Bridget. So I've had some guilt around when I don't really want to reach back and help people. I've had some guilt around that, right? And I'll never forget Bridget look at me dead in my face and saying, they adults. They adults. And
the only people I have pity for is children, okay, in life. As someone who came up with education as my main thing, like, yeah, youth them, that's it. I don't care about nobody else and their struggles.
Right.
Asterisks.
Right. So I took that with me, right? I took that with me, and I truly believe that my way of dealing with it now is surrounding myself by other people who know what that feels like, right? Most of my friends are from the struggle and are successful in their own right today, right? And we relate to, we relate to each other because of that. And I'll never forget that when I was trying to have a few come to Jesus moments with my dad about how he manages, and not even my dad, both my parents. I talked to y'all earlier about finances. When you get to a point where you can teach your parents, that feels like an accomplishment. But if they don't receive it, then then
you can bring the horse to the lake, but you can't make it drink water.
So my big revelation and my real way of getting past survivor's guilt was, if I'm giving you the tools to help you live this longer, healthier, fuller, freer life, I need you to accept that as the solution and not expect the Band-Aid to the problem, right? I've always been drawn to people who want to get at the root of a problem as opposed to continuing to put Band-Aids on it, right? Like, this wound is going to continue to be a wound.
Yeah.
If we don't address the deeper issue. And I've learned that when it comes to dealing with survivor's guilt, for me, how I deal with it is giving people the resources they need. All I can do is teach you financial freedom. All I can do is try to help you with your credit. Because if I give you $100, what's that going to do? You going to come to me 2 weeks from now saying, oh, well, that's gone. But if I teach you, if I teach you what I've learned for how to do the things that I'm doing, then I feel like that's going to help you more. But that, I think about something as simple as that $100, right? That goes towards my future kids. I'm more concerned about my future kids and setting up life for them, because they didn't ask to be here. They're not here yet, just so y'all clear, but they also didn't ask to be here. I want them here. And if I want you here, if I'm bringing you into this life, it is my responsibility to make that life as beautiful and full as it can be. So the guilt for me has been relieved over the years when I think about the life I'm trying to create for that next generation. And you can't keep pouring into a generation that doesn't want help if you're giving them the resources and they're not receiving.